I just want to show how you can set this up right out of the box for your system. Now, understand that there are multiple types of system, number of speakers you have at your venue or whatever, but the easiest one and the most common one is 2 pair of tops and 1 or 2 subwoofers. If that's a situation, we want to set that up. So we'll connect the output of our mixing console to the input, the port behind that I just showed, the input port, and then we're going to be using the low and the high outputs in this Driverack PA. So the low output is going to be connected to our subwoofer, and then the high output is going to handle our mid and high frequencies. The mid output we're not going to be using because our top speakers will handle just both mid and high frequencies. One of the features, which of course it has to have to be a loudspeaker management system, one of the features it has is a crossover, because it takes your full range output from your mixing console, splits it into your low and into your high. So that's like the basic thing you have to set with using this, and that's what we just want to go into right now. I will show how to use it directly from using these controls, and then I'll show how to use it with the iPad, and how to get the iPad and everything connected, hopefully in the next video. So I'm pretty sure a lot of you are going to be using this without the iPad anyway, so might as well just show how to do this. So the first thing you want to do is to click this wizard button, and then when you do that, you have a bunch of menu here. So you have run all wizards, which is the first one. We have, I'll probably use this rotary controls to go select. So this is run all wizard. The next says run setup wizard, run auto EQ and level assist, run EFS wizard, and then wizard option. So the run all wizard option simply runs the setup wizard, the auto EQ and level assist, and the AFS. AFS simply means advanced feedback suppressor, which is another good feature that this DBX has. We don't want to run everything now. We're going to get into all of them in separate videos. So we just want to do setup wizard. So we'll choose the second option, which is setup wizard. I'll press this rotary control to select, and then there are options to run all setup, run input setup, run GEQ setup, which is a graphic EQ setup, run speaker/amplifier setup, want to run all setup. So I'll select all setup, and then it loads to running setup wizard. So you want to choose your starting point, either a current setting that's already built into this or a new setting. We'll go with new settings, and then I'll press to select, starting from new settings. Just give it a moment to do its thing. And then we start by selecting our input configuration. So basically, what kind of signals are we getting from our mixing console into the DBX Driverack PA2? If you have a mono signal, which is just one signal coming in, then you can select mono. As you can see here, we've got the M in here. But let's assume we're doing our stereo left and right, getting our master left and right from our mixing console into this. So we have a stereo connection. We'll go stereo. Oh no. Okay. Oh, I've overdone it. Yes. Select stereo. Hit this to select graphic EQ configuration. Now, a stereo linked graphic EQ configuration simply means whatever you set as your graphic EQ for your left input also works for your right input. But a dual mono splits the graphic EQ into two, so you can get a different settings for your graphic EQ for your left input and a different setting for your right input. I don't want to do that. I want to link my graphic EQ because I'm doing a stereo and this wants music anyway coming in. So stereo linked, I'll select that. And then one good thing about this is there are presets of speaker brands and amplifier brands built into this. So select main speaker brand. So you want to select if you have, although it's quite limited, even if you have your speaker brand listed here, the exact model of the speaker might not be listed here. So we've got a few: JBL, Behringer, DB Technologies, EAW, EV, Mackie, PV, QSC, whatever, the Yamaha. And if your speaker brand is not listed in here, then all the way down you'll see an option that says not listed, which I'm pretty sure most of you would want to go for. Or if you have your speaker brand listed, you go for the speaker brand. You can have your speaker brand listed like Yamaha. I'll select Yamaha, and then there are models for the loudspeaker, and as you can see, the models are not too much. And oh, they've got quite a few. But if your model is not here, then you can then go for not listed, which is the same thing as selecting not listed if you didn't see your speaker brand anyway. So I'll select not listed, assuming my loudspeaker brand is not here. If you also have an active loudspeaker as well, you can, that's not here, passive or active, you can select it if you see it, else not listed works as well. I'll select not listed and then select main speaker mode. Now this is very tricky for some people because main speaker mode, the options here are passive and two-way. What this simply means is not the passive and active speaker they're talking about. When they say main speaker mode, passive in this context simply means you are your main speaker, which is your top speaker, is driving, is producing both your mid and your high frequency. But when you go two-way, simply means you have a different connection for your high frequencies and you have a different connection for your mid frequency. That simply means in your output connection behind, you have to, the highs will only produce, you connect the high to the high frequency if it's a two-way main speaker, and then the mid has to be connected to the mid frequency woofer. Most of our speakers the top handles both the high and the mid frequencies, so I'll go with passive. As you can see here, you have H, just one connection to the speaker, but if I go to two-way, you've got two connections to the top speaker, which I don't want, so I'll go for passive. And then I'll select passive, and then it asks me, are you using subs? Yes, I'll be using sub in this situation. As you can see, it puts the subwoofer below, and then I'll select that. Select sub speaker brand similar to what you had when you were doing your top speaker. So I'll just go straight for not listed. You can go through all of these brands and models to see if you've got the one you want. Because I initially went for not listed, it didn't give me any model to choose from. Select sub speaker configuration. So if you've got a stereo sub, left and right, you go for stereo. If you've got a mono sub, you go for mono. Subwoofers of low frequencies, it's difficult for you to split them into left and right because most of the instruments that you send to your subwoofer, like your kick drum and your bass guitar, you pan them in the middle anyway, and it's quite difficult based on the way low frequency works, quite difficult for you to tell if your low frequency is coming from left or right. So I usually go with mono. What happens here is both the left and the right output of your subwoofer, we have the same signal. You can do stereo if you want. I just want to do mono here, and doesn't mean I just have one sub. You can have multiple sub and connect to one sub and loop that from that one sub to other subwoofers. Mono still works. So I'll do a mono sub. Select high amplifier brand. Now if you're using a passive speaker and an amplifier, then you select your amplifier brand similar to what you did in your speaker. But if you're using an active speaker or active speakers and active subwoofers, then you're not using an amplifier anyway, it's built into the speaker, so you go to non-listed, not listed. So I'll go for not listed. Here, low amplifier brand, which is the amplifier driving your subwoofer. I'm using an active one. You can select the one you're using. If you're still using an amplifier and it's not listed here, you can still go for not listed, which I'll select. Apply current changes. Of course, yes, we wouldn't have gone this far if we didn't want to apply all of our changes. And then I will apply the changes. Setup is now complete. Now there's a button here that says back, so I will go back and go back again, and this is what we have. I don't know if you could see this very well, but basically this screen tells you your the setup, the configuration of your settings from left to right. If I use this pen to demonstrate, you've got L and R here at the beginning, which is your left and right input, because we are using a stereo input as per our settings. And then it goes first of all through the graphic EQ engine, which is GEQ written here. And then from graphic EQ, it goes through the auto EQ engine. It goes through the advanced feedback suppressors. Now, almost everything here has not been set yet, so it all goes through them. And probably they're all turned off, and then we go through a sub I think a sub harmonizer or something like that. I usually don't use it, it's just to boost your subwoofers. We go through a compressor, we go through the delay, and then we go through a crossover, and our crossover splits our signal into our top, which handles our high and low, and then high and mid rather, and then goes through our splits as well into our subwoofer as well. So the next thing we want to do here, which is another important thing after setup, is to set up our crossover. Click here to see that video. Thank you very much for sticking around till the end of this one. I'll see you in that video.